I'm pleased to welcome you to the Virgil and Joann Smith Thought Leaders Forum, which celebrates Women's History Month, the future of the information age. This presentation today is one of the signature programs of the Copenhagen Center in support of its mission to empower young women in order to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their communities and in their professions. We are all aware that women make up more than half the population of our country, and it is important that we have a gender balance in all the forms in which we communicate information so that we can build a more equitable and inclusive society. Our program today features some amazing women who will discuss a topic of vital interest to us all. The way we communicate is changing, as we are all aware. Our speakers will discuss how it is changing and what that means for every one of you here today. We will take questions from the audience following their presentations. Please type them in the chat room. Our convener this afternoon is Natalia Ortiz, founder of Nash Media. Ortiz is a bilingual, award-winning journalist with experience in both English and Spanish language media. She has worked as a reporter and anchor at local Telemundo and NBC stations in New York City and South Florida, and is presently a contributor for NBC Latino, as well as a host for Comcast Newsmakers in Florida and Washington, D.C. Ortiz recently launched Nash Media, a company that creates documentaries for English and Spanish language audiences. Natalie?
Thank you so much, Dr. Copenhagen. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be here with all of you ladies today and with everyone else who's watching us virtually. I'd like to first say that this conference, this talk is very important for many reasons. Not just because we are all, we're focusing on the perspective of women in the newsroom and in media, but also because we are talking about the future of the information age. I'd like to start with Amalie Nash. She's a senior vice president of local news and audience development at USA Today Network. She currently is in more than 200, in USA Today Networks, more than 200 local newsrooms. And in that role, Amalie is deeply involved in digital subscription strategy, audience development, network-wide projects, and recruiting and talent retention. She also serves in a cross-functional role reviewing budgets and products to ensure financial goals are being met. And she started with Gannett as an editor at the Detroit Free Press, where she helped supervise coverage of Detroit's historic bankruptcy filing and the federal extortion and bribery trial of the former mayor. In 2014, she became the executive editor of the Des Moines Register, which produced award-winning coverage of the 2016 Iowa caucuses and helped to launch Harvest of Change, one of the industry's first virtual reality projects. She moved to the corporate news staff late in 2016. And with this, I welcome Amalie Nash. Amalie.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored to be here. As I was thinking about what to say and the information age, I thought a lot about the future of journalism in the information age. Obviously, it's what I know and what I've spent my career doing. Journalism and information are intertwined. I decided to organize my thoughts into some distinct themes. I'm calling it 5 things, which is how we consume a lot of news these days, broken into lists, chunks, scannable items. It also happens to be the name of USA Today's popular daily podcast that covers 5 top news stories and why they matter. So let's talk about the information age, why it matters, and where we're at. So thing 1. What are the consequences of a world with too much information? This is where I started and where I feel like we're at in this phase of the information age. We have too much information. We don't know what information to trust. And a lot of our tech platforms are designed in a way that allows us to consume only the information we want to get or to live within the echo chambers of people who think and believe just as we do. We've seen the consequences of this in a lot of ways. For instance, in the fact that so many Americans still do not get vaccinated and cite false information about vaccines, or that there's polls showing 40% of Americans still don't believe Joe Biden legitimately won the election, despite no evidence of widespread voter fraud. These are the things that, as an industry, we're really focused on talking about information and the truth. I found some interesting research out there on what happens when we're bombarded with too much information or data. Researchers believe two things can happen to us. One is that we become obsessed with getting to the bottom of a problem, and we keep digging and digging, taking forever to try to solve it or form an opinion. We become paralyzed by information overload. The other is that we become overwhelmed with the amount of information out there, and we give up, falling back on our pre-existing beliefs. That's where we find ourselves today as a society, and where journalism finds itself as an industry. Setting aside the financial challenges that are facing journalism, the greatest challenge to our industry today is the lack of trust and a belief in a common set of facts. What do I mean by that? Every year, the Gallup does a poll looking at trust in media. The most recent poll that was released last October showed just 36% of Americans trust the media to report accurately and fairly. The number was twice that between 1972 and 1976. It's not just news sources that are suffering from a lack of trust or a belief in facts. It's academia, research, really everything that comes at us. It's a pretty scary place to be. That brings us to thing number 2 to talk about. What do we do about this? So every year, Nieman Lab, which is a journalism industry think tank, asks leaders in media for their predictions for the year ahead. I was reading the latest survey, and one of the quotes in there really stood out to me. Rainey Aronson-Rath of Frontline said something that speaks directly to this issue. She said, "My belief is that journalists should use every tool at our disposal to try to maintain and rebuild a shared reality in the face of growing global threats, and to try to harness technology as an accelerant for truth in a worldwide environment where it's often used to facilitate disinformation instead." So what kind of tools and technology do we have as an industry to combat this problem? One example in media is the growing number of fact check positions in our newsrooms, reporters who identify and either verify or debunk information in real time. Across the USA Today network, which we have more than 200 publications, we have a growing volume of fact check journalists. And we also have a grant from Facebook to do fact checking. The way that works is that if something's circulating on Facebook and it's gaining some steam, Facebook flags it into a database that our journalists have access to, and then they find the meme, the article, the image, whatever it may be, and they fact check it, they write a piece on it, publish it, and then they put that in Facebook's database. So if you're scrolling Facebook and you see something that might be problematic, you may see a flag that says, "This has been fact checked by USA Today, learn what the truth is behind that." Another way we can battle misinformation is to include more transparency, our reporting and sources, so readers can examine themselves. For instance, if we're writing an article that references a court file or a database or something else, we link to it, we include that data. We use anonymous sources sparingly. We write columns explaining how we got information or the lengths we took to get information that we ultimately weren't able to get. Technology is rapidly changing. I think one of the more exciting outcomes will be this focus on facts and the truth. Right now, we're seeing technology make a huge difference in getting factual information to the citizens of Russia. Telegram's share of mobile internet traffic in Russia rose to 63% in the first 2 weeks of March, and Clubhouse, the audio app where people can join rooms and talk, is being used by Russians to discuss and debate the war. And that's, of course, occurring in the backdrop of Russia shutting down a number of apps and ways of communication to get out there. So thing number 3, let's talk about how the delivery systems of information may change in the future and what the information age may look like. This is a great question. I don't think that many of us could have predicted how we'd be getting information today if someone had asked us this years ago. For instance, if you would have asked me years ago, I probably would have said we'd be getting more information in journalism coming at us through VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality. As you heard in the introduction, when I was at the Des Moines Register, we did one of the first projects designed specifically for virtual reality. And at the time, experts in the field were saying that everyone would have a VR headset by that Christmas. Now that was 2014. And of course, most people still don't have them. They're getting more mainstream, but not to the degree that we may have predicted just 8 years ago. A few weeks ago, I sat in on a presentation by some of my colleagues on where journalism may fit in the metaverse. It was an interesting discussion, but it also felt really theoretical to me. In the metaverse, which uses VR and AR technology, we could essentially be immersed in an alternate digital world. You could experience a trip to Europe without ever leaving your couch or meet up with friends for a virtual concert. There are a lot of applications for journalism, and I think we're watching to see how this technology is being developed. Of course, new jobs and new skill sets would be needed for working in this environment. I also think our delivery systems for information will be more personalized. We crave connection and a curated experience. Just like we appreciate that Netflix and Amazon and others have learned what we like and don't like, we expect news and information to know what we want and to feel more personalized. This, of course, can lead to the dangers we've talked about earlier with echo chambers, but if the delivery systems are done right, it could be powerful. Okay, so thing 4, how can you prepare yourself for a future career in media, technology, or related fields? One great way is to really diversify your skill set. Take classes that aren't required, but are in emerging fields or fields complementary to what you want to go into. For instance, many years ago, when I was a reporter at the Ann Arbor News, I took a class at the local community college on web coding. As a reporter, I didn't need to know how to write code, but I thought it might be beneficial in presenting my stories, and it was. For those of us who came up in the print journalism industry, we didn't need to take classes on broadcast, but I sure wish that I had, because by the time I was later in my career as a journalist, we were all doing video and publishing all of that online. So I think the best advice is to know that you're going to need to continue developing your skill set and learning, and to really spend time as you can diversifying it early in your career. Also, surround yourself with mentors and a support system. It's so important to learn from others and have people supporting you as you make your way in your career. Ask people you meet in your field how to get ahead and take their assistance when offered. Nothing beats a great mentor. It's how so many of us got to where we are today. Finally, thing 5, since this is a Women's History Month workshop, we should talk about the role of women in the information age and of course in media, since that's what I know. I think our industry, like so many, is coming to better understand the importance of reflecting our communities. In 2020, my company, the USA Today Network, pledged to reach parity with the communities we serve by 2025. We report on this annually. In September, we reported that we had increased representation of journalists who are female, Black, Indigenous, and people of color across our newsroom. USA Today, for the first time, has more females than males in its newsroom. I'm blessed to work for and be surrounded by strong women. My boss, the president of the USA Today Network, is a woman. My colleague, the editor of USA Today, is a woman. So the top 3 news executives in our company are all women. We also have an employee resource group in our company dedicated to supporting and empowering women. Still, there's a lot of work to do. A study last year found that only 27% of C-suite roles in media companies were held by women. Reuters Institute recently examined 200 news outlets in 10 markets and found that while women make up 40% of the staff within newsrooms, we only make up 23% of top editors. At the USA Today Network, we've made advancing women into top leadership a priority and have several programs to support that. A number of articles I found on women leaders in media say having women in top jobs changes the workplace culture in ways that benefits everyone, and especially women, including modeling better work-life balance and ensuring women are heard and part of the decision-making process. Catherine Viner, who's the editor-in-chief of The Guardian, said in one of the pieces I read, "I hope that women starting out now have far more opportunities than in the past, but I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we said there is yet a truly level playing field. I hope that doesn't feel like a depressing note to end on. I hope instead that it feels like a rallying cry to you, a push to continue making progress. Let's keep making progress together. Thank you again for having me as part of the program, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Amalie. I appreciate your time. We're going to move on now with Marsheila Hayes. Marsheila currently serves as the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for Fox Corporation. In this role, she leads the company's inclusion initiatives, and she develops recruiting, retention, and engagement strategies for diverse talent, in addition to providing governance to the company's 8 employee resource groups. Marsheila oversees the company's enterprise-wide internship program, and she manages Fox's external partnerships with diverse journalism associations and talent partners. In her dual role as an HR business partner, Marsheila also provides strategic partnership to people managers and interns across the company. Marsheila believes in the power of mentorship and the importance of community service. She is a member of the New York Urban League of Young Professionals and serves on the Morgan State University School of Global Journalism and Communication Board of Visitors. A Memphis, Tennessee native, Marsheila is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Inc. She holds a master's in strategic human resource management from Georgetown University, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Communications from Tennessee State University. Welcome, Marsheila.
Thank you, and hello again, everyone. I am following a very tough act here, so I promise to keep it short and sweet and as brief as possible. But the information age, let's talk about it and dig into it. So one of the things that I absolutely love about the media industry is that it is constantly evolving and doing so at a rapid pace. Every day, it feels as if there's a new platform emerging for storytelling that the traditional media giants and news entities especially must learn to navigate and ultimately master to remain in the space of meeting consumers where they are and keeping them engaged long enough to view them as a trusted source of information and entertainment. The constant evolution is exciting, but it can also be very intimidating for those who are trying to enter the space and establish a career in media. When I try to imagine where the media industry and the information age will be in the next 3 to 5 years, I can only think about how much it's changed from just 5 years ago. As of 2020, the US tech industry employed roughly 12.2 million workers, which I'm sure has increased significantly since then. Even at Fox, we built a media center in Tempe, Arizona to serve as the primary streaming and technology hub for all of our businesses. Almost all of cable TV networks now have an OTT or over-the-top platform, which creates space for more original content and a higher demand for content creators. And instead of LinkedIn, our talent acquisition team turned to Instagram and TikTok to recruit talent for our newest platform, Fox Weather. And that's also a shameless plug for Nick Kozer, the dancing weatherman, which I'm sure you all know and love. NFTs have introduced a new era of art collecting, and my mother, a soon-to-be retiring credit and loan auditor, has over 13,000 followers on TikTok. I only have 90. Okay? So I say all of that to say that while we may not know exactly where the future job roles or future careers in the information age or the media industry, we may not know exactly what they look like moving forward, but there will always be a digital or virtual component to consider in the way that we do work. I feel that one of the silver linings in the darkest of dark clouds of these past 2 years has been the way that we adapted to leveraging our digital resources and explored more ways to connect and collaborate virtually, hence today's session. The opportunities that have emerged from that are the onset of more remote work opportunities. This is especially important as it has opened doors for those who are navigating disabilities or socioeconomic and geographical barriers to join and contribute to teams without having to physically relocate or alter their environments. I find this incredibly valuable because as a D&I leader, I'll be the first to admit that I don't know everything about what it means to be inclusive and equitable. I haven't lived every human experience there is to live from every identity facet possible. I truly believe that the more people you have on your teams that don't look like you, don't have the same lived experiences as you do, the more opportunities there are to view the work that you do from different perspectives. Inviting, learning, and fully embracing different perspectives leads to sustainable innovation and boundless creativity, which is one of the skills I think that every individual in this industry needs to be successful. When it comes to being prepared for the future of the information age, whether you're just getting started and building your career or looking to pivot into a new space or place within your career or within this industry, I think it's crucial to understand and be comfortable with who you are authentically and align yourself with people who you can see and who see and appreciate that. One thing about me is I've always had a big personality. I don't get bothered very easily, and I'm known to crack an HR appropriate joke from time to time. But there was one point earlier in my career when my boss at the time told me that my personality was too big and that I needed to tone it down or else people wouldn't take me seriously. So I took that feedback and attempted to model the behaviors of some of the other leaders around me. Afterwards, I had several colleagues asking me if I was okay or if I was depressed. And honestly, I was, because I was trying so hard to be something or someone that I wasn't, someone that wasn't authentically me. And I didn't realize until later that it was my way of being and doing things that enabled me to establish different kinds of relationships and partnerships with people that my then boss didn't have. The experience also taught me the importance of embracing difference and the importance of representation, all facets of representation at all levels within an organization. And that experience shaped how I lead and how I coach other leaders to lead with empathy and managing their teams. And our teams today are becoming so much more diverse because, as I mentioned earlier, we have so many more opportunities for folks to come into different organizations, develop different platforms, and bring their full selves, their full bundle of human experiences to these places and spaces so that we can understand and learn how to navigate nuance in our storytelling. And I know, as it was mentioned in my bio, that mentorship is incredibly important. And we talk about it often. And I'll be the first to say that I wouldn't be where I am today without my mentors, one of which this Thought Leaders Forum is named in honor of Mr. Virgil L. Smith. I have to include the L. But we must also talk more about sponsorship. Sponsors are the folks who will bring your names up in conversations and rooms that you haven't been invited to yet and align you with opportunities that will not only grow, but catapult your career. Because a sponsor is investing their social capital in you, you have to be willing to take that investment and run with it. And I believe that oftentimes as women in this industry and others, and especially speaking as a Black woman who has experienced this, we can get caught up in imposter syndrome and doubt ourselves to the point of inaction. We can also undervalue ourselves when it comes to asking for the opportunities to innovate and develop in this space, and also undervalue ourselves when it comes to asking for the salaries that we know that we are worth. And this is Women's History Month, so women, we gotta get that together, all right? So closing that particular piece of my chat, having both solid mentors and sponsors in the media industry can keep you abreast of how the landscape is changing and what types of opportunities you should be looking out for if you want to continue growing your career. of all the things that we've talked about thus far today, I know that if it wasn't for the opportunities that I've had to connect with people, connect with men and women, but especially women in the industry, I don't think I would have been as supported as I am right now in my career. Because again, things are changing. There are so many different roles that are emerging out of different needs. And once you can align yourself with people who can get to know you, understand what it is that you want to do, where you want to grow, what you're curious about, then you can start showing up for and being positioned for opportunities to create some of these new and different things that we're seeing in this age. But it really does have to start with you owning who you are and aligning yourself with people who can appreciate that. Lastly, I believe that many of us have taken time to reflect and reprioritize what's most important to us, both professionally and personally, over the last few years. And in the great words of Maxine Waters, we're reclaiming our time and investing it as intentionally as possible. And one thing that I agree with fully with the remarks made earlier is that it's incredibly important to invest in yourself. I would encourage everyone here to intentionally invest in themselves and stop viewing others or anyone who's doing something that you would like to do as a competitor, and instead approach them as a collaborator. Many of the things that we're seeing today, the different changes in our industry, the different advancements that are being made in the information age, yes, it may be one person that may be mentioned as spearheading it, but it takes a whole team. It takes a whole effort of dedicated and enthused people to make something happen, to build something bigger and greater than ourselves. But we will close ourselves off to opportunities to do that if we keep thinking, getting in our own heads, that imposter syndrome, thinking that we're not enough, or if we keep thinking that, well, I have to do bigger and better than someone else. This is truly a space and a place for collaboration in the information age. And I, again, just encourage you to invest in yourselves, start looking at how you can collaborate with others so that you can be in a place and space to lead different efforts in this way. And I'm just very thankful to be here and look forward to any questions that you all may have as we continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marsheila. And actually, we already do have some really great questions from some of the people who are watching. I'd like to start with a question from Elena for Amalie. This person says, what academic training do you need to become a journalist fact checker? And are newsrooms using virtual reality now?
Those are both great questions. So what kind of training do you need to be a fact checker? Actually, there are a bunch of organizations out there, including the Poynter Institute, which is a journalism training center that offer a certification in fact checking. And that's what we send our folks through. So you don't actually need to do anything, in college or elsewhere, but just sort of have an interest in that. And then there's kind of a rigorous process where every fact check is reviewed by two different people. You sort of learn the process of going through, because obviously the worst thing you can do in a fact check is to get the fact check wrong. And so we spend a lot of time working through a whole process where things are reviewed more than one time. I think that's another example of where you would want to diversify your skill set so that, you had a lot of knowledge of a lot of different things, but ultimately you can get the training as part of your career. So I know the University of Iowa, where I was before, actually has a fact checking class. So I don't know how common that is out there, but it seems like a very interesting class for anyone to take, even if they weren't necessarily going to go into that. As far as VR goes, we're doing some in that space, but we're doing more in the augmented reality space. We've seen more success around that. So for instance, on the 1-year anniversary of the attacks on the Capitol, we did an augmented reality that could place you there and you could see what was going on and be able to navigate and do all of that. We've done it for a variety of other larger projects. And so I think both still have their place, but for us right now, we're focusing a little bit more on AR than VR technology.
Okay, and so to continue with a question from Suzette for both speakers, In your perspective, what is the state of pay equity for women in media?
I'm happy to hop in there. When it comes to pay equity, I know at Fox we just did um, a huge project where we looked at across the company all of our roles to assess what are people making at different ranges when it comes to market data and what we're paying people. And we ended up positively impacting as far as increasing the salaries or the hourly rates of over 1,500 of our employees. And a vast number of those folks, while it was a mix of men and women, but a large number were women or women occupying those different roles that were positively impacted. And I think that as many companies are looking to be equitable, that more and more projects or initiatives like that will be happening. But I think that as women entering into the space, I always encourage people to do a bit of research when it comes to applying to different roles or just looking at your current role. Getting on different sites like Glassdoor, different salary calculators can be really helpful in just giving you like a high level idea. Going on LinkedIn, seeing who at other companies are occupying the same role that you're in and connecting with those folks and just asking to have a conversation and get to know them and being honest and saying, you know, I'm looking at or evaluating my role. These are the things that I'm doing. I would love to be able to have a conversation with my manager or with my leader about revisiting or reassessing my compensation. May I ask, you know, what are you currently being compensated and what is that based upon? Because sometimes we do get numbers in our head, but we're not looking at the years of experience or the different types of training or certifications that people may have that may justify them, you know, getting a bit more of a bump than it would be at market level. So I definitely think that of course, the appetite has always been there for everyone wanting to get paid more, right? But I think that the resources and the tools that are available for free on the internet are even more prevalent to help people understand, engage, you know, what are people making? What is equitable? What makes the most sense? Those are just my initial thoughts there.
No, those are great thoughts. We did a similar type survey at the USA Today network to figure that out. One of the things that was important for us, and even being able to get a baseline of understanding, Gannett, the media company that I'm part of, merged with another media company called Gatehouse a couple of years ago. And when we looked at it, we had, I don't even know how many, but hundreds of titles. And so someone's called a reporter over here, who's called a reporter two over here, because some had classifications, called a multimedia journalist over here. And you know, so it was very hard to tell exactly what the baseline was. So we went through a whole leveling exercise last year where we established exact job descriptions, years of experience, what the titles were and all that. And we're able to then put those in our HR system so that we could start getting a better look at this. And we do it at the site level as well, but it was important to us to be able to understand, you know, from the larger level, exactly what roles people were in so that we could then do the comparisons. I know there's been a lot of discussion of it. And of course, Marsheila mentioned this, it's harder for women a lot of times to ask for raises. And so we try to make sure that it isn't necessarily, it's not on the individual employee to say, hey, wait a second, I've done a great job here, but that we're spending more time and effort making sure that we're looking more closely at what the pay scale is for people. It's not just people who had a competitive offer and therefore got a raise to stay, or someone who raised their hand and said, please give me a raise, but that we're spending the time behind the scenes really ensuring that there's equity in pay.
Thank you. Question from someone named Deja. I hope I'm saying that correctly, and I apologize if I'm not. Regarding imposter syndrome, this person says, I noticed during interviews, I always feel the need to oversell myself as a Black woman. What are some tips I can use to learn that less is more? Better yet, what are your companies primarily looking for?
I'm happy to hop on to that first, considering I'm a Black woman, so I can speak to that. One thing that I recommend, and I coach different friends and family when they're going out for different roles as well, is to stick stick to what is being asked of you, or what the role responsibilities are in that position. You know, I recommend taking what the company is asking for when they're saying like, this is what we're looking for, put that on a sheet of paper, and then just start drafting out those things in your previous experience, the skills that you have that would tie directly to those qualities. So that way it's not a matter of overselling yourself. And it may be, if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, it may be that you're not overselling yourself at all. It's just you're not comfortable and not used to speaking to the value that you add to a team, right? But if you do feel that you are overselling yourself in a way, I would just recommend sticking to exactly what they're asking you in that role, tying your previous experience, your skills back to each thing, and making sure that you have a little bit of a story or some sort of a narrative to speak to about each of those different responsibilities that they're looking for. So that's where you can tie different examples of things that you have done, projects that you've worked on, initiatives that you've developed or led. But it's a matter of, if you keep it to just what is in that job role, I think that you may feel a little bit less like you're overselling yourself. You're just making sure that you're properly and fully articulating how you can add value to that team based upon what they're looking for. And as far as what different companies are looking for, or what my company is looking for, that truly varies based upon the role. I know one of the things that we have done at Fox is really try to remove any type of education requirements from our roles, because we saw that led to, you know, different biases being put in place, or we felt that was more of an exclusionary practice, because we have so many people who may not have a degree in a particular area, but they have transferable skill sets that can move them from one industry to another. And so we removed that from a number of our roles, especially all of our tech roles, or we're in the process of removing that from all of our tech roles, because we're also developing programs internally where if anyone wants to pivot into the media industry or learn more about it, or just try to understand if they would be a good fit, we're developing rotational programs across all of our different industries, from sales to entertainment to news to sports, to bring folks in so they can get an initial brush of what's expected and see how their skill sets will play out in those different areas before either one of us commits to bringing them on full-time in a particular role. So it's like getting that on-the-job training, and, you know, just opening up the doors for us to be able to invite more people into our places and spaces.
I think that's great advice. I would say we're doing some of those same things in the USA Today network. If you would have asked, I don't know how many years ago, what are you looking for? We'd all tick off. You went to J school, you got, 3 to 5 years of experience to get this certain role and all that. And we've realized so much that, we need to connect with people in ways that we have not. We need to serve communities that we've largely ignored. And we need to do better when it comes to what our coverage looks like. And we need different people doing that. So for instance, Oklahoma has a large Indigenous population, and we were looking for reporters to cover the Indigenous communities there, not finding anyone who had experience with that, who was from the communities, anything like that. And so we developed a program within the Oklahoman, which is one of our sites, to do fellowships for a year of people who aren't trained journalists, but they bring a unique skill set because they understand the issues. They're from the communities, and so they have an interest in journalism. Both of them, we've done a program with 2 of them so far. Both have been fantastic, and we've hired them full time. And so, it's more on the job training that you might have seen in the past. And so I think when you're, in an interview, I think talking about the unique skill sets, or, what kind of job you'd want to do, or what the needs are that you see that you would be able to fill. I've always also, when I've gone into an interview, really tried to think about what are the 2 or 3 things I hope that this interviewer comes away with. And so I try not too hard to, stray from those things, to really stay on point, that if they come out of here thinking that I know how to do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to have a better shot of doing this job. But I would say that, the skill sets overall are a little bit different. And we're really thinking through what's important in media and how are we going to achieve our goals and connect with people and engage communities. And it looks different today than it did even 3-5 years ago.
If I can add one more thing to that, just as we're talking about interviewing, anybody who's interviewing for roles, make sure you have a good list of questions for your interviewer as well. When it comes to just development, how is this company growing, or what are different development opportunities that you can take part in, or in the particular teams that you may be interviewing for, what have been some of their major pain points, or what would be things that someone could bring to the table to help make this team successful. Like, have a few good questions in your inventory, in your pocket for any interview that you go on. Because I know that with interviews that I have done that I've remembered most, it was people who came in with really good questions for me and asking me about the company and just different ways that they could grow with us. So that prompted something in me to say, please have a good roster of questions of your own for any interview that you do.
Thank you, Marsheila. Mario says, I'm a student journalist and see how sometimes our bosses first approach males on the team for some of the opportunities. As a male who wants to support women achieve equality, how can I support my female journalists?
Well, that's unfortunate to hear that that's still happening, but it does. And being an ally is very important. I mean, we've all been in meetings as women where we get cut off by a male colleague or someone. I was in a meeting just a few weeks ago where a female had an idea, a male amplified it, and then someone said to him, that's a great idea. And so we see these things happen a lot of the time. And so I would encourage some questioning around that of, did you ask so-and-so, or this person has a particular skill set or something else? Depending on your relationship with the boss, I think it makes sense sometimes to point it out to people, in a setting where you're alone and say, listen, it feels like maybe that's not the case, but perception, women may be concerned that it feels like you're coming to me and the other male colleagues in terms of, offering up assignments and that sort of thing. But I can, recommend others who might be good for that assignment. I think just being cognizant of it is a really good first step in that toward, helping to solve for it and helping to recommend, to champion, to support, to give credit to make sure that other voices are heard, to help. If somebody's in a meeting and somebody gets cut off, hey, Marsheila was saying something, I'd like to hear what she has to say, that sort of thing. So I think as long as we sort of all have that as the top of mind mentality, that it's a really important point and something that we can help to correct for.
I completely agree. And definitely understanding the interests of your fellow female journalists, like what they're really good at, what they want to work on, things like that. Having that in the inventory of your brain will help you be able to best advise when your boss comes to you and say, hey, I want you to do this story on X. And it's like, oh, actually, Lillian is a dynamo in this, that, and the other thing. I think she would be the best person for it. So yes, completely agree, and would definitely recommend just getting to know your colleagues more so you can help to align them with some of those great opportunities.
Question from Marsheila. What is the value of a college degree today, given that some companies removed the education requirement? What is a must-have mindset for a college graduate to become a leader in the field?
I'm happy to pop on here. I think education, wherever it may be, is incredibly valuable. I think that you have to be mindful of in your decision making about whether you're going to college or going to graduate school or going even beyond that. How is this going to invest in you? Like, is this something that you want to feed into yourself? Because everyone makes their own decisions as to what they want to invest their time in and what they don't. And as I mentioned earlier, we're working to intentionally invest our time and invest in ourselves. I think education is one of the best investments that you can make in yourself. When I went to graduate school, I didn't have to go to graduate school in order to transition into the role that I have right now, but it was an investment in myself that I wanted to make, because once I got that education and that exposure from my graduate program and my undergraduate as well, you can't take that away from me. I can always move and transition into somewhere else or do something else. But that's truly, I still find it incredibly valuable, anyone who is willing to invest in themselves from an educational standpoint. And I don't think that us removing that requirement necessarily says that we don't value a college education. It's just a matter of understanding that, you know, there are some people who have socioeconomic barriers and they have not been able to attain a undergraduate degree or a graduate degree or have a formal education, but they have incredibly transferable skills that can continue to add value to our organization. So again, I incredibly value education in all forms in how it comes. And I forget the second part of the question. I'm so sorry.
What is a must-have mindset for a college graduate to become a leader in the field?
I would say, and then I will turn it over to my colleague here, but I would say humility is incredibly important to me. Understanding that while you may be a smart person, you may know a number of things, you don't know everything. So you have to be in a state of always willing to learn and learn from the people around you. Also being flexible. Things can change at the drop of a hat, at a drop of a dime. But knowing that that change does not mean that you're doing something wrong or that you're doing something that's not good. It's change happens, and you have to be able to be flexible and be very nimble. And I also think just being entrepreneurial, having a mindset of, you know, this is working great and this has been working great, but how can we introduce something where maybe this could be a little bit more efficient, or maybe this could reach an audience that we haven't touched or reached before, or maybe this is just a way that we could position ourselves as a team or as a business in a way that would put us one step above or a couple of steps ahead of our different competitors. So that humility, that flexibility, and having an entrepreneurial mindset, I think are some must-haves, from my opinion.
Completely agree with that. I would say, as far as the education piece goes, I also, you know, huge proponent of education. I do think it's very valuable. I learned more in graduate school than I did in undergraduate school. Again, I didn't need to get a graduate degree, but for me, going back to school when I was a little older, I think, you know, I was maybe ready to learn some more things that I didn't necessarily do. I think you would probably find that years ago, there was more of a focus on, did you finish your degree in 4 years? Where is it from? What's your major? And does it align specifically with this position? And that there's a lot less focus on that it's about, you know, the investment in yourself and everything else. And so I believe it's important. A lot of people who come to journalism don't have journalism degrees. They learn journalism, you know, as it comes about, but they have political science, English, philosophy, all kinds of different degrees. And they, you know, end up being really good journalists. And my master's is not in journalism. It's in sociology and criminology, because I thought that that would be something interesting to be able to just sort of expand. And I took a lot of different classes and all of that. And so for me, it was more about learning and becoming just more well-rounded as part of that. In terms of a must-have mindset, I wanted to go back to something that Marsheila said, because it really spoke to me in the speech, and it's about authenticity. And we probably all have had this moment in their career, and you talked about how you have a big personality and we're sort of asked to tone it down, and then, you know, that's not who you are. I remember when I was named to the top editor in Des Moines, and I came at it like, okay, now I got to be different. Like, I got to be more official. I'm the #1 editor here. I'm someone who can be a little profane. I better not swear in front of my staff, and I better, you know, say the right things. And I'm a sarcastic person and I like to joke. So I need to be more buttoned up and like what I think an executive editor should be. But it's not really me. And the person who preceded me in the role was this huge personality, cheerleader guy who would walk around the newsroom slapping people on the back. What are you working on? What's going on? You know, kind of thing. That's not my personality. And so I think I spent a couple of months kind of trying to figure out, who am I in this role and how do I fit in this role? And am I the right person? Kind of that imposter syndrome. Like, the person I am isn't what I see necessarily as the person who should be the executive editor of a publication like the Des Moines Register. And it took a while to feel comfortable in who I was, and to feel authentic, that I'm not going to do it the same way that he did. And that worked for him. And, it was motivating and all that, but I need to motivate people in a different way. And so I think you really have to learn who you are as a leader and to lean into that and to sort of be authentic in who you are, and not what you think the role should be or what you think you should be in the role. You got to that position for a reason. And so therefore you need to sort of, illustrate that through your actions. And I also learned in that role, and also in the last 2 years in the pandemic, how important it is to care about employees as a leader. I think that so many of us, I'm just so action oriented, and I'd be in the newsroom, what's coming for tomorrow, what's on deadline, all of that. And we had a tragedy right after I started in Des Moines, where one of our senior editors died. And what everyone said about him was he really cared about me. Like, he asked me how my weekend was, how my family was, what was going on. And so to me, I really thought, that's how I would like people to think about me, but I don't do those things. So I need to actually do those things, and to invest in people, and to care about them, and to talk to them about their careers. And especially as we became so separated in the pandemic, I spent a lot of time thinking about that and what it means, because everybody's been struggling. And so I started a practice at the beginning of the pandemic of sending a card to someone every day throughout the USA Today network. We have 4,000 employees. So just a card thanking people for what they do, and letting them know that there's somebody out there who cares about what they're working on and everything else. This was a great story, that sort of thing. I've gotten so much more out of it than people have in receiving a card and the notes that I get back. And it's really just sort of illustrated to me that this, the media industry is so important. What we do is critical, but it's about the people who are doing the work. And as a leader, we really need to focus on that.
Question from Terry. What new jobs do we see out there in the next few years? Marsheila or Amalie, either one of you.
I just based upon kind of where our hiring needs are right now, and I can only say this from where I stand within Fox Corporation, we're just expanding so much in the tech space and looking at how tech intersects with media. With the emerging of all these different platforms, from your OTTs. I know our sales team is really focused on AVOD, which is like advertised video on demand, like the advertisements that are running within these OTT platforms, and looking at our streaming services, like the one that we own, Tubi. It's so much in the tech space in media that I think that we will continue to go in that path and in that way. Because not only is the need very much prevalent right now, just looking at how we're growing and evolving. Like I said earlier, every major cable network now has a streaming platform. If you're looking at some of our favorite, our timeless print entities, it's a huge digital presence, and a social media presence as well. And in the information age, where we are very much into our digital and virtual spaces, looking at intellectual property and also information security, those are things that are still falling under the umbrella of tech. And even with NFTs, which I think is just the craziest thing ever. It's so neat. I love learning about it and just that whole blockchain, but just that space, where art collection, where it used to be, you go to Sotheby's, you bid on these elaborate things if you have Sotheby's money. Hello, I know I don't. But you would go to these spaces and collect art in this way. And now NFTs are available where you can get this one-of-a-kind digital piece. So again, all of these things that keep stemming from and intersecting with tech and technology. So I think that as we look at the way we work, even the way we're doing things right now, this used to be something that was primarily in person. And now we're all connected here via Zoom in our respective places and spaces, but still able to connect with each other and collaborate in a way that we have all just had to grow accustomed to over these last couple of years. So that I can't say exactly what it's going to look like, but I know that it's going to be continuing to stem and intersect with technology.
We've added a lot of content strategy and data roles in the news industry. And so we can get a ton of data on what people are reading, how often they're coming back, how much time they're spending on stories. We're a digital subscription-led business. And so what people are converting off of, what our subscribers are reading. And so we're using all of that to inform our content strategy, what we're writing, how we're covering things, what we're marking as subscriber only, because we have subscriber exclusives on our sites. And so we've added a lot of roles that are journalist roles that have now data training. And so they can speak journalism and they come from that background, but they know an awful lot now about data and about the behavior of our users and all of that. And we've done a lot of studies and research around it to back that up. And so those are new roles that didn't exist a number of years ago. We're also adding a lot of community engagement roles as we think about reaching out to communities that we have not done a good job of serving over the years. And so, that can be in some cases, some of our newsrooms have mobile newsrooms. So journalists are going out in the field to places that we haven't typically been and announcing it and spending time with people in communities, doing more Facebook Lives, spending more time on different platforms, reaching out to people. We have digital advisory boards where people who aren't subscribers are invited to get a free subscription, tell us what they think. They come from communities that haven't really been served by the news as much in the past. And so we're trying to understand more about how to better cover these communities and relying on those people that become part of the digital advisory boards, and then they become advocates and champions for our brands, hopefully. And so I think community engagement is a big space where we're starting to see a lot more positions and other things and focus on that as well.
Okay, so we have the last two questions for this session. This one is from Melly. How important is for students to learn AI, AR, VR, and all forms of advanced tech for me to be a leader in the newsroom in the future?
I'm not sure it's necessary to learn the things so that you can do them yourself, but I think it's important for you to be able to advocate and to understand them well enough. If you're leading a team, they want to know that you know what they're doing and that you support that, but they don't necessarily think, well, you have to be out here shooting on 360 cameras yourself to be able to understand that. So I think, a good understanding, familiarity. I mean, one of the things about being a great leader is surrounding yourself with people who have different skills that can kind of fill in the gaps and that sort of thing. So if you have a real strong digital background, but you don't necessarily have an investigative editing background, you pair yourself up with someone who knows how to do that. So I think more than just necessarily learning those skills is understanding the importance of them, really kind of seeing the future and helping to, remove the barriers that may exist to getting those things done. People with traditional mindsets are more the issue beyond somebody actually knowing how to do a whole variety of things. If you want to go into one of those fields, obviously it's critical that you have those different skill sets. But if your goal is to lead an organization, I think you really just need to have a good understanding support system and then be able to surround yourself with people who can get the work done.
I completely agree with that. I feel like you can end up derailing yourself a bit if you're trying to master every single thing, when you can really just focus on looking at how all of these things can come together and developing a strategy to best leverage these things or best use these things or execute on initiatives with these different things. I think that sometimes, I know I have done it like earlier in my career where I felt like I had to know every single piece of every single thing. And I ended up getting so focused on the trees that I couldn't see the forest. And I was wondering why I was exhausted and why I didn't like different things that I was doing. And it's like, oh, you're forcing yourself to do something that you don't need to do. There's plenty of smart people out here who already know how to do that. That's the only thing they want to focus on, and they will do that and they will work with you. And that just goes back to looking at folks as collaborators as opposed to competitors. You don't have to master what somebody else has mastered over here. Just see how you can work with them. And to the point made earlier, just understanding how you can bring it all together, have a high level to know what's going on around you, and then say, okay, this is how we can really work with these things and pull them together.
That's very helpful information, ladies. The last question is from Kiana. She says, as women in the workplace, we're often labeled as emotional. In turn, we have to build a thick skin to compete in male-dominated arenas. Do you have any tips or encouragement on how to balance the very real physical and emotional experiences of womanhood with maintaining a strong and fearless exterior in the workplace?
I'm happy to speak to that. So I claim the year of 2022 to not identify as a strong woman, because identifying as this like strong woman, it completely, eliminates my ability to feel, and it enables others to just view me as this robot who can take on any and everything at all times, and I can't. I am not Superwoman. I do not have a cape that I wear consistently. I can be very strong at different things. I wouldn't describe myself as overly emotional. As I said earlier, I don't get bothered by too much. So I don't cry a lot, if any, if you ask some of my family members about different things. But I show up with myself as a full human that has human experiences, and I don't apologize for that. And I encourage people who I work with, teams that I work with, leaders that I work with, like, yes, we are all here to get things done. We all have goals, we all have initiatives. But as it was stated earlier, these are people that we're working with, people who are experiencing life. They're not just reporting on what's happening. These are things that are happening in their communities. They're being impacted when they see people who look like them on the television screen, being killed or being persecuted or these different things. And so as a woman, I thought that it was like very important to have this super thick skin and be able to take all of these different things and again try to mold myself into something that I wasn't. And the only thing that I got from that was very frustrated and very tired, and at some points disheartened about being in the media industry. So as far as my tips or what I would encourage you to do is again speak to your own authenticity. Who are you as a person? What makes you tick? What are the things that you feel empowered by? What are the things that you feel just burn your biscuit? It's the most appropriate thing I can say. And then try to find environments where you can truly feel comfortable being your authentic self and aligning yourself with people who you see that they can show up as their authentic selves and understanding different things that they do or different ways that they go about being able to do that. I know it can get incredibly hard in many different workplaces and spaces, especially with different dynamics on your team. But I think that reiterates the importance even more of just trying to find and understand and truly learn and embrace who you are authentically so that you can build that confidence within yourself to be able to navigate any environment that you may have to. I know for myself, that was something where I was like, I can't, I am a full person. I get emotional. Something terrible happens in our newsroom. I will get emotional and I won't apologize for that. And I make sure that people around me, if they're getting emotional, if something is happening, that we provide opportunities for them to express themselves fully. And understand that and reiterate that like we're all people. Yeah, we're professionals, but we're all people too. And that's not just for women, it's for men too. And when I work with different leaders, whether it's a male or a female, and they're like super frustrated and I can tell, I say, hey, we don't have to talk about this right now. We can step away. I'll reschedule this meeting. Have you eaten today? Have you taken a walk? You look like you're about to turn into the Incredible Hulk. Do you need a snack? Because we don't have to do this like this right now, because I can respect you for your humanity and I can understand when you need a break. And the more that we try to do that with other people, the more that we create an environment where that's more commonplace.
I think that's absolutely right. I would just add on quickly, because I know we're at time. My hope is that this is changing. I'll say in the last couple of years, I've seen a lot more men cry in the workplace or get emotional than I had previously. There's a huge focus on mental health, and I feel like people aren't as afraid to talk about it. And so people are more in touch and willing to talk about it. I think there's the aspect of people look to you as the leader, and if they see you being upset or something else, it's like, what is going on here? There's a concern. But if people feel like you're just sort of this wall of non-emotion and non-steel, and I'm not really a crier either, but if they see that, then they don't have a connection with you and they don't feel like you're as much human. And I think that everyone's really craving connection. As much as I love being connected to all of you on Zoom, I'd love to be in person so that we were. And so I think people are really missing that. And so, one way of showing that connection is to show actual emotion. So in the beginning of the pandemic, we're all working 16 hours, and the people that directly report to me, I'd ask them how they were doing, and they might say a lot of things or a few things, and then they'd ask how I'm doing. And I felt like I had to be, I'm muscling through this and everything's good and whatever. And after a little while, it was like, I felt like I needed to be more vulnerable so that they felt comfortable being more vulnerable. Things are tough. Being on Zoom 16 hours a day sucks. This is something that we're all dealing with together. So I think it is important to be authentic and to, recognize that emotions can be a very powerful connector between people.
Thank you to both our speakers and to all the organizers for today's event. This concludes the Virgil and Joann Smith Thought Leaders Forum for Women's History Month for the Future of the Information Age talk. Thank you.
Thank you.